Welcome once again to our show that is called Real Shame. It's a show where we watch movies that we probably shouldn't have seen, and we're making up for that now. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
And you've seen the title, so you know what we're going to get into. We're going to get into some war or maybe anti-war films. But before we do that, we always like to discuss what we've been watching. So, Andy, what have you been watching?
Not much these days. Just had a lot of other stuff going on. But I did watch a movie with Kurt Russell.
Oh.
It's a TV movie from the 1970s, mid-1970s. I will give you a hint. Kurt Russell plays Charles Whitman. Do you know who Charles Whitman was?
No.
Charles Whitman and Lee Harvey Oswald learned to shoot in the same place. Where was that? United States Marine Corps. Charles Whitman was the UT sniper.
Okay.
So the movie is called The Deadly Tower, and it basically depicts the events of the day when Charles Whitman went up to the top of the UT Tower and started shooting at people back in the 1960s. I thought it was really good, especially for a TV movie. They don't do a lot of heavy-handed dramatics with it. It just kind of is matter of fact, you know, because he basically killed his mother, he killed his wife, and then he went up the tower and started killing people. And that's basically what happens in the movie. So there's not a lot of real sensationalism to it. It does have Ned Beatty in it. He just passed away. Actually, as we're filming this, I know air a few weeks from now. But anyway, he plays a civilian that goes up to the tower with some of the policemen, which actually did happen in real life, to try and stop Charles Whitman from shooting. But anyway, that's a good TV movie that I watched. And then I watched a documentary on Netflix about Studio 54, which I thought was interesting. I saw the movie 54 with Mike Myers as Steve Rebell and Salma Hayek and Ryan Philippe back in the day. I thought the movie was pretty weak, honestly, back in the 90s when I saw it. But I thought the documentary was pretty interesting, just kind of about the rise and fall of Studio 54. It actually really didn't even last that long. The club itself only lasted 2 or 3 years, something like that, before the owners, Ian Schrager and Steve Rebell, were indicted for basically tax evasion. They were skimming money off the top, and they got in trouble, and they went to prison, and basically the studio closed. Well, it was sold to somebody else, and I think they turned it into something else. But I thought that was an interesting documentary. That's what I've been watching. What have you been watching?
I watched a couple of things. I watched a movie that just came out recently called Cruella. Which I've heard good things about. It wasn't for me. It's just kind of like it's one of those jukebox movies that I feel like following the footsteps of the Suicide Squad, which is also doesn't bode well for it, where it's just like one bombastic hit after another, where it's just like feels like that's the only, or also like Birds of Prey, I feel like kind of fell into that a little bit too. It just feels like they don't have really anything else going for it except for that, the music, right? There's not a lot going on for it.
Uh-huh. A
lot of people like it. They like the fashion, which is kind of cool. They like Emma Stone, but honestly, it's just like the whole time I'm watching, I'm like, why? Why did they make this movie?
Yeah.
Other than like a cash grab. Like there's no artistic merit to it to me, right? And it's really sad because the guy who directed it was the same guy who directed I, Tonya. And I, Tonya was a great movie.
I liked I, Tonya, yeah.
But this one, not for me. Following that up, I never watched 101 Dalmatians, the original animated show movie. Mm-hmm. So I watched that, and that was good. It's interesting just kind of how much animation has changed, because there's stuff in there like, I believe there's like smoking and just like, they have a lady murdering, Cruella basically want to murder the dogs.
Sure. And
it's like nowadays with Cruella, they kind of they don't want to have like a person in there that would murder dogs. So they kind of explain it a little bit in Cruella, and just it's interesting just how stark the differences are and stuff like that. So I liked it. I mean, I don't think it's that great. It's kind of hard with like, you have like animal protagonists, but they're also like in the real world. So there's only so much they can do because they're kind of keeping it real, right? And so it's, I don't know. Maybe it's just Cruella kind of ruined that whole universe for me. I liked 101 Dalmatians. It wasn't like great or anything like that in my book.
Well, now you got to watch the one with Glenn Close.
Yeah, I hear that's terrible.
I don't think I've seen that.
She's in 101 Dalmatians, and the sequel's 102 Dalmatians.
102. They added one.
They did. The last thing I watched is, did you ever watch Top Gear, UK Top Gear?
Mm-mm.
So I like the UK Top Gear. I like Grand Tour whenever They did that. There's a new show out on Amazon. I think it actually came out this week, called Clarkson's Farm. It follows one of the hosts, the presenter Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear and Grand Tour, as he takes on this 1,000-acre farm that he bought and tries to grow crops and make it a sustainable like revenue generating farm. And it's fun. It's really funny. I mean, if you like his sense of humor, you'll like it. He's kind of, I believe he plays it up more than he actually is, but he kind of plays this bumbling oaf a little bit, like he doesn't necessarily know what to do and stuff like that. And if you like him from the Top Gear, Grand Tour days, you'll dig this. So those are what I've been watching. Let's get into our featured review, and that's going to be
Paths of Glory from 1957. After a failed attempt to take a German-occupied area in World War I, 3 soldiers are selected at random and put on trial for cowardice. It's up to their defense lawyer, Colonel Dax, to try and save the men from the firing squad in Paths of Glory.
Why not shoot the entire regiment? I'm perfectly serious.
Well, now, Colonel, you're missing the point entirely. We don't want to slaughter the French army. All we want to do is to set an example.
Oh, well, if it's an example you want, then take me.
Take you?
Yes, sir, if it's an example you want. One man will do as well as 100. The logical choice is the officer most responsible for the attack.
Come now, Colonel, I think you're overwrought. This is not a question of officers. Paul, we don't want to overdo this thing. Suppose we just make it a dozen.
I was talking of 100 men. Now we're down to 12.
Paul, let's not haggle over this thing anymore. Let's get it settled once and for all so that we can all live with it.
Oh, perhaps I was a bit too anxious to see proper justice meted out. I've spent my entire life in the army. I've always tried to be true to my principles. That's the only mistake I can ever be accused of. I'll settle for this. Have the company commanders select 1 man from each company in the first wave. 3 in all.
Well, that's very reasonable of you, Paul.
So Paths of Glory was a Stanley Kubrick film. I guess this is the first Stanley Kubrick film that we have done.
For the show, yeah.
For the show. This was his 4th film, excluding any documentaries. He did some documentary shorts, but he had done Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing, and then finally, or not finally, but his 4th film was this Paths of Glory. It stars Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dax, Adolphe Monjou as Major General Georges Brulard, George McCready as General Paul Moreau. In addition to that, we've got people like Wayne Morris, who plays the cowardly Lieutenant Roger, Ralph Meeker, who was been in a lot of movies, but is in Kiss Me Deadly, which is the film noir movie from the 50s that introduced the briefcase that you can't see inside it, but it glows, which Quentin Tarantino used in Pulp Fiction. And, it's been used, I think, in a couple of other movies. Joe Turkel is one of these. So Ralph Meeker is one of the soldiers that's put on trial. Joe Turkel is another one of the soldiers that's put on trial. He worked with Stanley Kubrick in the movie The Killing, which is a movie that he did before Paths of Glory. He would also work with Stanley Kubrick in The Shining. He is the bartender.
Okay.
Of the Overlook Hotel that tempts Jack into drinking, and he plays Tyrell of the Tyrell Corporation in Blade Runner, and he is still alive. He's 90-something years old now.
Wow.
Another one of the soldiers, or the third soldier, the final soldier, is Timothy Carey as Maurice Farrell. He worked also with Stanley Kubrick in The Killing, and he reminded me of like a John Turturro type guy, right?
Yeah, I got that vibe.
Something like that, or even Peter Stormare, something like that. And then finally, there is only one female in this film. At the very end, a German woman singing. She was billed as Suzanne Christian, but she would later go on, actually shortly after this movie, to marry Stanley Kubrick and would be Christian, or maybe Christiane. I don't know. It's Christiane, Christiane. I don't know, Christiane Kubrick. But they were married all the way until he died in 1999.
Wow. So
long time, 40-something years. All right. It was filmed in Germany. It's, as you said, kind of an anti-war film. Yeah. I've seen it. This is probably, again, like the 3rd time that I've seen it. But you've never seen it.
I've not.
You're not a war film guy,
I'm
really.
not, yeah.
But what did you think about Paths of Glory?
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say that, like, I've said on this show numerous times, and I've said to you probably even more, that I don't like war movies. I'm just not into that kind of thing. There's a few exceptions that I like, but for the most part, I like it. But I'm thinking I like anti-war movies.
Yeah.
Because I really like this movie a lot.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Thought this movie was really good. I do think it's a little long, like the part at the end with Christian singing. I don't understand what he's trying to say with that, and it just felt like that didn't need to be a part of the movie. You know, I felt like the movie was good and done by then. I didn't feel like that added much to the movie, but maybe there is, you know, some reason why. I mean, maybe there is some kind of theme or reason why it's added, and it works. It just didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
I just felt like it kind of took away from everything else that was going on in there. I feel like this movie is very prescient, and very timely. It's just, not to get like too political, but it just kind of feels like at some place like we don't have much autonomy over our lives, and we're just like these pawns being controlled like by the machinations of like the wealthy and the powerful. And you kind of have that in this movie, right? Where, these guys are just kind of like chosen randomly almost, well, except for like one, to take to be put on trial and to get killed for what happened.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that was out of their control. The whole war was out of their control, but also marching up, I think it was Anthill was the name of it.
Yeah, they're trying to take the anthill.
Was out of their control. The guys was trying to push back, but then it was like, hey, you can get promoted and all this kind of stuff. And, for the people in command that have no skin in the game, yeah, it sounds great. Let's do it, right? But, you're just throwing these bodies up. And I just feel like that very much, to me, is how I feel about the world as a whole right now. I don't know if everyone feels that way, but that's how I felt to me. So, like, watching this movie, it was just like, it's instilling all these kind of fears and these like anxieties that I've been having over the last, year, 2 year from the pandemic, post-pandemic, and all this kind of stuff. So I really dig the movie. I thought it was really well shot. I thought it was really well written. I thought Kirk Douglas was really good in it. It's interesting because like he's the only one that doesn't have like a British accent, right? I feel like there's no consistencies in the accents.
No, well, the soldiers don't really have like Ralph Meeker and Joe Turner. They don't really have British accents. Yeah, Adolphe Monjou kind of has one. George McCready has one. Yeah, there's no real because they're all French, right? They're all supposed to be French soldiers. There's no real effort made to make them sound French. Sound French. Yeah.
So I really, really, really enjoyed my time with this movie. So you said you've seen this movie before. So what was it like for you this time around?
I still love it. I mean, I think this is a really, really great movie. As you said, I mean, it is shot really well. I like, so first of all, it is a war movie or anti-war movie, whatever you want to call it, but it's also a courtroom drama, which we kind of dig those. We've done A Few Good Men on the show. We've done My Cousin Vinny. We've done The Verdict. We've done the awful Find Me Guilty, the terrible Find Me Guilty. So the other three are good, but the Find Me Guilty is freaking awful. But I really like the trial in this film. But I also like the battle scenes because I feel like the battle scenes are done pretty realistically for their time. Because if you watch some other war movies from kind of the same era, they're a little clunky. And this one, it's kind of tense, when they're trying to take the anthill and there's explosions and people dying and everything kind of.
I feel like it looks better than like the first Wonder Woman did with it. Like I think this looks better than like what they did with the first Wonder Woman, and that's a recent example of like the First World War. Yeah,
but yeah, like you said, it's. You're frustrated watching it because these guys are kind of helpless. And so at the beginning of the film, you've got the Major General George Brulard comes in and tells General Paul Moreau, like, oh, we need to take the anthill. And he's like, oh, we can't do it. And he's like, well, there might be a promotion in it for you. And, so he's like, oh, okay. And I love how the camera kind of moves around. Like and, it's all very kind of fluid. And, they're kind of doing like a little dance almost. And he goes from like, oh, I don't think my men can't do that to like, oh, there's a promotion in it for me. Oh, well, then they can do it. And this guy is so kind of power hungry that when basically the second wave refuses to go out because they're led by this cowardly Lieutenant Roget, They refuse to go out. He wants to fire on his own men in order to make them leave.
Yeah.
He gives the order, and of course, the order is refused because they have to have a written order and everything else. And then he tries to bury that.
Maybe it's because they watched the movie we're going to review later in the week, and they do. Hey, like,
maybe so. But yeah, I mean, so this is kind of a common theme in several kind of anti-war war movies. I know, like 1917. You've got. I don't think you've seen 1917, but the guys are trying to get a message, to avoid a certain, a crisis in the war, to avoid casualties. Same thing happens in Gallipoli. I'm sure there's plenty of other movies where this sort of thing happens, where there's an exercise in futility. Taking this anthill is just impossible. They can't do it. But because they can't do it, they're punished for it. And like you said, there's three guys one guy is not really picked at random. He is picked because he
has some dirt on the other guy.
He's got some dirt on the other guy. But then the other two guys basically are picked at random, and they're going to be killed if they lose this trial, which spoiler alert, they do. They are unable to be saved from the firing squad. And poor Joe Turkel has been like knocked unconscious.
And
he's propped up in a stretcher, and they wake him up to get shot.
I thought he was in a coma.
No, they like pinch his cheeks, and he kind of comes to before he's shot. I'm like, just let me sleep.
I mean, I pulled this from IMDb, but basically that whole trial is a farce. And there's no like formal written indictment or anything. The court stenographer is not even present, and the court refuses any evidence that would support an acquittal. Like they want these guys to die because of cowardice in the face of the enemy or whatever that stuff. And the the other thing too is like I think you can draw some parallels to Glory a little bit, because I think Glory kind of takes this like impossible mission, but kind of like dramas it up and makes it like, yay, we did this, we fought for this kind of stuff. And I think this is like the other view of that, right? Like they're two kind of lenses to look at the same thing, where you have this impossible duty of these people, and they die for it and stuff like that. So I just, like I said, I just really this time of my life with everything going on, this movie just really resonated with me and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love the trial because Kirk Douglas, everything he tries to do is basically thwarted, by the one guy sitting at the table. He's like, I don't this immaterial. I don't see why that's, and you're just like,
just give him an inch.
It's very, very frustrating. I like the shots when they're like in the trenches and they're kind of just following them, kind of walking around. There's a contrast between the tightness of the camera work in the trenches, and then the camera work whenever the big huge ballrooms, and they're very echoey, and especially when they're having the trial, every word kind of echoes, and it's all this decadence. When the guy's having a party, Adolphe Menjou's character is like having a party, and he's like doesn't even want to hear what Kirk Douglas has to say. He's like, I got to get back to my guests. And he's like, well, he ordered him to shoot. He ordered to shoot on his own men. He's like, what? Just.
Well, it seems like he's not going to do anything about it too.
Right,
until,
he does. He does.
But then he pulls the same thing on Kirk Douglas.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, he's like, hey, thanks for bringing this to my attention. By the way, you're getting a promotion.
Right.
Which is like kind of handing him like hush money and stuff like that.
Yep.
And the other thing, like, again, it's just like, you read in the news now that all these like CEOs that have lost money over the pandemic are still getting their bonuses and stuff like that. And this, like, what's going on with like Monjou and McReady, just like, to me, reeks of all that. It's like, no matter what's happening down below, we're gonna make sure you're set up good and all that kind of stuff. It's like, sorry, I digress a little bit on that.
I was gonna say, I think the part at the end, at least what I kind of get out of it with the woman singing, is you have these soldiers who have been through hell, and they've recently been through hell trying to take this anthill.
Yeah.
They failed. 3 of their men were shot. 3 of their compatriots, whatever, were basically shot. Well, not basically, but were shot by the firing squad. So they're, hurt. They're tired. They're wounded. The girl starts singing. It makes them feel better. So it brings a little bit of joy to it, because they all start humming along or whatever, and some of them start crying. And it's kind of this emotion is all, coming out. And then the guy comes up to Kirk Douglas, is like, all right, we're going back to the front. And they're like, okay. And that's where it's like, okay, back to where we started.
Yeah.
It's kind of, they get this momentary reprieve from this hellacious, time that they've been through in the last week or whatever. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to do it all again.
Yeah, but
so
she's
it's like it never ends.
She's like a captured person, right? I mean, she's like
she's like a
and
German.
then that just doesn't seem to jive with like the whole anti-war sentiment, in my opinion. But I can kind of get that. I just like I said, for me, I was just like I felt like it ended so well, and then this kind of just dragged.
Well, maybe Stanley Kubrick was like, "Hey, I like this girl," because he didn't know very.
Yeah,
he's like, "I'm putting her in the movie."
She like auditioned for something. He's like, "We really don't have a role for you, but
I'll
I
like
make one."
You. Yeah. No, I don't know, but yeah, that's just kind of what I get out of it.
Did you say this was based off of a novel?
I did not.
Yeah,
no, I did not.
I only have one last thing to add. I know you usually do this kind of stuff. In '92, it was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically relevant or significant by the Library of Congress, and it's preserved in the United States National Film Registry.
Yes, as well it should be.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So Stanley Kubrick would go on to work with Kirk Douglas again 3 years after this in the movie Spartacus. And then, of course, Stanley Kubrick died in March 1999 after he completed Eyes Wide Shut, which was released in July of 1999. That was his final film. He
and while filming AI, right, or in pre-production?
Yeah, AI was going to be his next project.
Yeah, I think it was in pre-production.
Spielberg took that over and did that. So as I watched this film, I was reminded of there's a Tales from the Crypt episode in season 3, which has Kirk Douglas and Eric Douglas, his son, and it's also another kind of war episode, kind of like this, where I think Kirk Douglas is Eric Douglas's superior, and he orders him to do something, and he refuses to do it, or he doesn't do it because he's a coward. The episode's called Yellow, which like Yellow Belly. But it's a really good episode. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis.
No Michael Douglas in that one?
No Michael Douglas. Kirk Douglas and Eric Douglas only. Yeah.
Is Eric Douglas doing stuff?
He's not doing anything anymore because he's dead.
Oh, well, there you go.
He died in, I think, 2004.
Shows my naivety.
But I mean, he was a sometime actor. Obviously not nearly as successful as Michael Douglas. Yeah. And then, of course, as we all know, Kirk Douglas lived to the ripe old age of 104 and just passed away, I guess, last year, 2020. Yeesh. All right. So this movie is in the Criterion Collection. I'll mention that because the movie we're going to talk about on Wednesday is also in the Criterion Collection. It's 95% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with a 95% audience score. 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. Obviously, this predates their show, but they did do an episode where they talk about great movies or something like that, and they both talked about how good this was. And Leonard Maltin gives it 4 stars.
Awesome.
So,
well, you mentioned, Wednesday we're gonna do another Criterion movie.
Yes, sir. I wanted to do another movie that I have talked about several times on the show. Another kind of anti-war movie. Another movie where 3 men are put on trial, due to basically orders that they got from their superiors that they obeyed, kind of like this film. The movie is from Australia. It takes place in South Africa, but it's an Australian film from 1980, and it's called Breaker Morant. We'll do that on Wednesday.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, if you've seen Paths of Glory, let us know. Leave us a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or shoot us an email if you're listening to us through your audio podcatcher of choice. That email address is realshame@gmail.com. We also answer viewer questions that are sent there, so please send us your viewer questions. realshame@gmail.com. We post randomly on social media. On Instagram, we're at realshame. Like, subscribe, share the show, because that really does help spread the word, and we really do appreciate that. And stay tuned in a couple days as we go down under and watch Breaker Morant. We'll see you soon, guys. Bye.